So today, joining me on the stage for the panel discussion are Richard Byrne from UK Cloud, Mark Wickings from BT, and our own Brent Larson, Senior Sales Engineer at Opsview. In this session today, we're discussing CMDBs, automation, integrations, and partnering with Opsview customer success team. Please feel free to ask questions, as Mike just said, using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side, and we do hope to get to all of your questions today, time allowing. So let's start with some introductions. Richard, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Richard Byrne. I work at UK Cloud. We're a cloud company doing VMware mostly, but with other products. We use Opsview to monitor all of our different stacks and internal services. Tons of stuff in tons of different ways and all the variants that you can think of with a cloud company.
Brilliant, great. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Richard. So Mark, could I ask you to do an introduction, please?
Hi everyone, pleased to be here. I'm Mark Wickings. I work for BT Security and I'm Senior Manager in Cyber Engineering. So I've been with BT 21 years this September, and I've worked in security through pretty much all of that. In my area, we look after all of the infrastructure and everything else that makes up the platforms that we then sell our cyber portfolio off of. And we use Opsview to do all of our proactive monitoring of all of the systems, both infrastructure, networking, all the way up to the application stack and even integrations with AWS.
Thanks very much, Mark. Appreciate that. So let's just move to Brent. Brent, if you wouldn't mind doing an introduction.
Sure, Matt, thanks. Hi, everyone. I think I've met many of you. Larson, I'm in the sales engineering team here at Opsview. Several years on board, coming up on 3, I believe, and spent a lot of time in the monitoring industry, all my career in IT and monitoring. So happy to be here.
Great. Thanks very much, Brent. So let's start with some questions. So one of the most common questions we're asked from customers and prospects is how they can integrate with the CMDB. So could I ask you first, Mark, could you tell the audience how you're using CMDB at BT, please?
Sure. So we're actually pretty large users of Opsview, and we have, I think, in all of BT, potentially 3 separate deployments of it. There's only 2 that I myself have purview over, but we use the CMDB in both scenarios. In our larger deployment, which we aptly dub Big Opsview, and our little deployment, which we dub Little Opsview, we actually use 2 different CMDBs. So on the Little Opsview, which is more specifically used to monitor our internal BT-specific things, so it might be our infrastructure or the shared infrastructure that makes up some of our products, or whatever it may be. That's what the more specific Little Opsview specializes in. And we actually use an integration that started life with us and Opsview together, and then we've taken it further to customize it very specifically for our environment. We actually back that off to our ITSM platform, which has a CMDB built in. I'm not sure where we are with using other product names and stuff like that, so I won't go into the details of that particular system, but we use the script that was developed in co with Opsview to begin with to manage, basically pull the monitoring profiles, so what you guys would know as host templates, from our CMDB and apply it to the host. So when we launch something new, it may be, or something we've already got, it may be a Cisco ASA, which will have a monitoring template for that. And although the monitoring template will exist in Opsview land, it will be applied via API from the CMDB. So the CMDB will say, you know, this is a Cisco ASA, whatever it is, here's all the spec, barcodes, all the usual information, but it will also stick what the monitoring profile is so that we know that gets applied, which gives us a very centralized way of doing it. We do a very similar process in our large Opsview as well, but obviously that's with a different integration, and that's more cookie cutter for standard product, so managed firewall, all that type of stuff that comes on. So yeah, we do heavy things between Cmdb and Opsview. It's mainly applying monitoring templates as well as verifying details. So actually some of our checks will confirm details and push that back to the Cmdb. So maybe we want to pull the live amount of RAM associated with a virtual machine. The check can pull back how much RAM is there and update the Cmdb in accordance through the API. So there's lots of, imagination is the limit, really. You can do a lot of things there. And I'll try not to go into the automation side of it because I think that will branch out into other questions later. But yeah, that's how we use Cmdb.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much, Mark. And Richard, are you using Cmdb at UK Cloud?
We're doing much the same thing. So we can add in metadata for Opsview into our Cmdb. We also have a tag for is monitored. So if we want it in the monitoring, we've got automations in place that draw that metadata out of the Cmdb and populate everything that you need for the host into Opsview. So which host group it's in, what kind of web server templates, any user credentials that are pulled out of the password database and put into Opsview, making sure that everything works.
Great, actually. Yeah, so on the subject of automation, this is an increasingly interesting topic that we're being asked by customers. And one of the things that they're interested in is how we can increase efficiency and save time. So I hear that you automated a process for password security.
Yeah, so within building on that automation piece, then we've got a monitor which checks the local password within Opsview and confirms that's the same as the R1 in our password database. If it's not, then it pulls down a fresh copy of all the metadata and refreshes the server so that we're always running the right stuff. And we're hoping to put it into a almost Puppet configuration management style, so that monitoring data will constantly be being refreshed once a day, so it's always up to date, all the templates, all the everything just being refreshed and put in there whenever we need to.
Great, thank you. And can I just ask Brent, is that an example of what we're seeing from other customers using automation like this? Do you see that cropping up these days?
Yeah, Matt, interesting. I don't think so. I think many customers we have aren't really utilizing the full potential of those automations. I typically talk about Cmdb integration in 3 levels. We certainly have the incident escalation into from an event to an incident. We also have the automation piece, where in the Cmdb, if you have new server CIs or network device CIs, they get deployed out automatically in Opsview based on that. A lesser known, but certainly powerful kind of a level 3 integration that I call, where we can, if there's application mapping in your Cmdb, so the applications and all the components, the servers, the network switches, the hip bone connected to the leg bone, as it were, we can actually synchronize in the subcomponents of a BSM model in Opsview. So a shameless plug for my upcoming roundtable discussion at BSM, if anybody wants to talk about that a little bit further. There's some folks out there that are synchronizing in actually subcomponents and can dynamically generate automate some of those BSM views. So I'd say what we're talking about here is best practice, but I'd encourage everybody on the meeting today to kind of look at that and see what other value that Mark and Richard are discussing today.
Thanks, Brent. And Mark, if I could turn to you, how are you using this to onboard customers, I understand?
So we're doing a lot on automation, and we have been for a while. It's key to being able to do things at scale. But certainly one of a good example of how we're using Opsview in the end-to-end journey for some of our product delivery would be on one of our products that we sell called CloudSeam. We have an appliance that we call a Sentry, which is effectively a device we put in the customer network that will collect all the logs, and it does other things as well, including having both Opsview agent and Opsview server on it, should we want to poll from it or just poll it. But to birth one of these new customers, when they come in, after we receive the information from the sales and account teams, usually in the form of what we call CEP, which is a customer enrollment package, which will give us certain config information that we have to get from the customer, such as IP address, default gateway, stuff that only they're going to know about their networks. But once that's plumbed into our SM stack, actually the full build of the appliance, because they're usually virtual. Obviously, if it's physical, there's more manual processes for those particular ones, but the bulk of everyone's using virtual these days. So actually, once that comes in, the entire process is automated. So using a combination of Cobbler, Kickstart, Docker, and various other bits, the whole Sentry appliance is built. And as part of that build journey, once the ISO for that particular customer is built, it gets pushed off to a server to deliver it to the customer. But the part of that journey actually pushes the information for that Sentry into our Cmdb, so that as it's built, the details are put in, all the standard stuff, but as well the monitoring template, which I spoke about earlier. So actually, once that serves in the Cmdb with the monitoring template, it will go into a shipped status, as in it's going to the customer. Once that Sentry is actually turned on and working, it will phone back home, and once it does, it will move it into a installed status, which will then push from the Cmdb into Opsview and automatically birth the device on Opsview, giving it the correct monitoring template, which of course is the same across all of the appliances. So effectively, from someone ordering the product to it being delivered, other than needing to get the details from the customer to put into the process, IP address, that type of stuff, the rest of it is end-to-end automated and delivered, including the full monitoring setup.
Right, great. Thanks, Mark. I mean, that sounds like a great onboarding customer experience. So let's move to customer success, customer support. So this is something at Opsview we're really proud of, and we believe that this sets us apart from other monitoring vendors. But we don't just like to beat our own drum. So Richard, could you maybe talk about your experience with using Opsview customer success team?
I really find it refreshing, because with most support companies, most company support teams are reading from a list or just by rote. They don't know exactly what's going on in the product or anything like that. With Opsview's customer support team, then you actually feel like you're talking to an engineer, a techie that knows what they're talking about. The number of times that we've had a problem, we can start digging into it, but I think I may as well just send an email to Opsview support, find out what they think while we're digging into it, and within probably about half an hour we get a response of, have you tried this, that, the other? We can respond back and quite often get a web exit if we need it. There's also they feel like they actually want to help, as opposed to just kind of, it's a day job. There's been times where I've been on a chat with I want to say Harold, but he's gone, I don't know how to do that, let me look into that. And a couple of days later, he's written a service check, he's written the ops pack to go with it, and just goes, can you test this for me? Can you see what it does? Does this act as you'd expect, just to find out? And then we can feed back to him, and he'll quite happily write whatever else that needs to be done, just to make sure that everything works properly. It's just a really fluid experience with the actual engineers of the support team.
And have you got a specific example you could give us where you've worked with the team on a particular challenge or an issue?
Most of our onboarding, because we've deviated slightly from standard Opsview. We're now using a Galera cluster, so that we have full site replication in a large database and high resiliency. However, that's not standard. It's not one of the standard models, and so we had a number of the support team coming on, investigating different problems that we might have had with database connections, advising how to tune the Galera cluster properly, even though they were still learning it, and we worked with them to understand it. Just so much time that was dedicated to understand our problem what we were doing and how they could help, and seeing it from the Opsview perspective to make sure that we were getting the best user experience possible.
Indeed. And can you just maybe briefly compare to how that compares to a previous vendor that you might have worked with? From
memory, we open a ticket with the previous vendor. If we're lucky, we got a response within a week. Right. And that was, we've now noticed that you've logged a ticket. We'll be with it shortly. Then there was generally a fair amount of back and forth the next week to kind of going through, have you tried this? And you kind of, that's literally, you're reading from the sheet. We've done that because every time that we've raised a ticket, we get asked to do this. And then I seem to remember that we've had tickets open for years with the previous place, whereas with Opsview, there's always someone driving it forwards, making sure that that ticket doesn't stay too open. And if it's something or a bigger thing, then it gets pushed along to engineering and gets roped into things. And we've got David Folan keeps pressure on things as well. It's just a really good experience. And so how much time do you think you wasted on that, with that previous, on the ticket, on the previous vendor compared to using us? Is that a good question? Most of my life. There have been there were horrifying WebExes whereas with Opsview support, they know what they're doing. And so they kind of get it done, and they maybe 2 or 3 hours and on a big problem. And they generally get to a solution. With the previous company, I was on a WebEx for 16 hours and we still didn't figure out the problem, the root cause. And we were just, in the end, they just took away the logs and went, well, we'll get back to you. That was about 3 weeks later, I think they did. But sounds painful. It's just so much more fulfillment. Yeah, right. Thank you, Richard. And so turning, Mark, if I could turn to you and ask you, what's your experience of working with our customer success team?
It's been really positive, actually. As I alluded to in my previous talks, we've worked with you guys closely for quite a long time, and we're pretty large users of Opsview. We worked with you guys with the service desk connector, which would be the initial, if you want, integration between Opsview and our ITSM. So that was kind of a joint effort. And since then, we've had calls where Opsview have been on every week, helping us bring our bigger installation to the positions we wanted in. And I think through the must be over 4, probably 6 years by now, relationship we've had, I think I've only needed to properly escalate things through a couple of times, which is really impressive. I mean, the scale of things we deal with here, I don't think there's many, if any, other vendors that have only had to escalate to a few times. That's really good in my book. So yeah, the relationship is very positive, and we've had issues. Opsview's always been there for us. We had some HA issues not too long ago, and Adnan and the guys were on, got the right resource aligned, kept us well updated on where they were at the engineering guys back at Opsview, and I think the whole thing was turned around and resolved in a matter of a few weeks or whatnot. So yeah, no, generally a very positive experience with Opsview regarding to support and customer success. That's great. Thanks very much, Mark. That's really good to hear that feedback from you both. So now let's turn to business service monitoring. This is something that's been available with Opsview for a long while, but not everybody uses it. So Richard, if I could maybe ask you, can you share your experience of using BSM? How does it help? We've started using it in certain areas. We haven't because we've only recently come back on board with Opsview. Haven't really delved too deep into it, but it allows you to have a nice dashboard and visibility of where the problem might be. So it allows you to summarize from a management view, certainly, that there is a problem, but it's not a big problem, or yes, they're nice clear-cut colors of whereabouts the problem is, what it might be, and if there is one. It's just a nice simplification tool. And I heard, I don't know if you want to share that, I heard that you used it to arrange an order delivery. So with Opsview, I think of Opsview as the art of the possible. So I haven't arranged it yet,
because we're not properly using it. But in theory, if you've got a full stack properly deployed, if the BSM goes red, there must be something of a problem that's going to be pretty much an overnighter, in which case you can actually get the event handlers to trigger a call out to Pizza Hut and go, it's going to be a long night, order 5 pizzas.
Great. Yeah, or whatever is your chosen delight.
I think pizza is one of those standard IT things. I think that's why there's the question of the favourite pizza.
It's indeed. Thank you. And so, Mark, could you share your experience of using it, and how does it help you?
With the, I know there's been a lot of work on the BSM recently, and I haven't personally looked too deeply into that. But when I was more hands-on with the config of Opsview, that was more in the early days of BSM, where it may not be quite as simple and easy to do things, but we actually saw a lot of value in it because we used, and I'm not sure if I'm getting my terminology correctly, but I think it's availability zones maybe is what it's called. But it enables us to actually report on SLA properly. So the problem with a lot of ITSM tools that I've seen in the past is whereas they let you run reports on a particular host or a particular service check or even groups of them, they're not normally smart enough to know how that would affect your SLA. So if we go back to my example previously with the Sentry phoning home, when that actually phones home, that will connect to a load balancer, which will connect to a very large cluster of different termination points effectively. What the BSM allowed us to do was monitor that cluster of potential termination points and say, you know, if 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the magic number of them goes down, does that actually impact your service? You know, how much overhead do you have in your clustering so that you can take 3, 4, or whatever members of the cluster offline without having a service impact? So what the BSM enables you to do is report on your SLA based on the service as opposed to the fact a host is up or down, which is a lot more powerful because if you've built redundancy into your systems, you don't necessarily want to take an SLA hit when you've either when one node's gone down of a redundant system. Yeah, node's down, you need to fix it. You want to raise the ticket. You want to get your support team, get it all sorted. But actually, is it an SLA hit if there's no impact to service? Well, no, you've built the redundancy in for that exact reason. So that's where the BSM, from my point of view, adds value.
Thanks very much, Mark. And just turning to our own Brent, what's your understanding? What do you see customers using BSM for?
I see a lot of uses with BSM for the the visualization. Mark, as you mentioned, BSM 2.1, beautiful layout. You can quickly map those operational zones and dependencies, redundancies, things like that. So there's the visual aspect. But what's also very useful is our notification mechanism is also built on potentially a BSM structure. So you could get the high level, order the pizza at the top. I love that. The business service has gone offline, and there's a lot of work to do there. So there's that. I think it's very valuable, and I really appreciate and like the way Opsview has done this, where we have the ability to integrate from, say, a Cmdb. You can pull those subcomponents in. You can do a lot with that, but it's very easy to create those manually. So if you have that institutional knowledge, you understand how these composite applications are situated in your estate, you absolutely can enable that through the tool. It's all menu driven, drag and drop the subcomponents to the business service. So it's a great way to get jump started with BSM. So I'd encourage everyone to at least go out and experiment, try to mock one up and see if you can get some traction in your organization. Chances are your folks, application owners, line of business people, will see this kind of logical representation of your applications and your business services and really find some value to that. So not only finding the root cause and trying to account for dependencies and redundancies, but also that ability to say, everybody's working off the same sheet of music, and we all understand this vertical slice of your infrastructure. Not all servers are critical, even though they think that.
Thanks, Brent.